This is Matthew Cratter from Trade University, and today I want to talk about Ethereum's fatal flaw. I've been getting a lot of questions about DeFi in particular and Ethereum. DeFi is a very interesting experiment. The one thing I don't like about it, though, is that it is built predominantly currently on the Ethereum blockchain, which I would suggest is a foundation of sand, especially given the fact that Ethereum is moving to a proof of stake consensus mechanism. And in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about what that means, what proof of stake means. If you want a little bit of background before watching this video, you can watch my video on ETH as a Bitcoin copycat, trying to pretend that it's digital gold like Bitcoin. And ETH has a long history of trying to decide what it's going to be when it grows up. Unfortunately, it had a very nasty childhood, a very corrupt childhood in which there was a very large pre-mine and pre-sale, and a lot of insiders were awarded essentially free money up front. So in many ways, it recreates the current financial system. It has a centralized, charismatic founder in the form of Vitalik Buterin, who himself has profited handsomely from Ethereum and has sold off large chunks of his holdings. But this video is not about that. Unfortunately, Ethereum is highly centralized. It's reliant, as we've talked about, on Infura servers and Amazon AWS servers. It can basically be turned off by the government making 2 phone calls to Infura and AWS. We talked about the pre-mine and pre-sale, but what makes these things even more sinister is now moving to proof of stake. What it means is that these same insiders who were awarded free ETH or really cheap ETH in the pre-sale or pre-mine now get to earn even more ETH by staking their ETH. And this recreates the whole fiat financial system and all its problems with the money printers and those who are closest to the Fed profiting, etc. Now, the real attack that's happening on Bitcoin right now, and it's an ideological attack, is that Bitcoin is bad for the environment, blah, blah, blah. I've made many videos about this, and so I don't want to really go into it. Obviously, Bitcoin is criticized for its large use of energy. I do talk about this in this video, is Bitcoin bad for the environment, as well as this one, Bitcoin and the electricity police, this idea that other people should be able to tell you what to do with the electricity you pay for. Now, under Bitcoin's current system, it's called a proof of work system, where Bitcoin miners basically burn energy. They use electricity to run their ASICs, their Bitcoin mining machines. And this is how the network is secured. This is how things work in the real world. There has to be an expenditure of energy to accomplish great things. Advanced civilizations, spacefaring civilizations, use a lot of energy. Civilizations that are stuck in mud huts and don't have the internet and don't have washing machines and cell phones do not use a lot of energy. So in itself, using energy is actually a marker of an advanced civilization. Bitcoiners and Bitcoin miners also understand that there's no free lunch in the universe or in physics, in thermodynamics, that you actually need to expend energy to create security. And this is how the real world works. A lot of Ethereans live in an imaginary fairy tale world where things can be secured without expending energy. If you think of Fort Knox, if you think of the whole global fiat system, which is built on the US dollar as the world reserve currency, this is a very energy-intensive system, and we've talked a lot about this. Bombing Saddam Hussein in Iraq because he sold his oil for euros. This uses a lot of energy, and so it makes sense that if you are going to have a currency or a store of value, that energy needs to be expended. So those who criticize Bitcoin's energy usage never compare it to the energy usage of the current fiat financial system. All those empty Wells Fargo bank branches, all the skyscrapers in LA and Manhattan full of people working in finance, etc. This is a lot of energy usage, not to mention everyone commuting to work. And so, unfortunately, like most scams, Vitalik and Ethereans, They tell you how much they love the environment and they want to protect energy expenditure, but the way they want you to express this is through buying their pre-mined coins. Now, ETH is moving from proof of work, as I said, to proof of stake. And ostensibly, they're doing this to conserve energy, to move to a more environmentally friendly system. Unfortunately, it's not a secure system, as I'm going to demonstrate. I'll link to this where the Ethereum.org talks about proof of stake and their version of it. So I'll let you read that. I'm going to talk about these two different consensus mechanisms. So we have proof of work, which is what Bitcoin operates on. Ethereum is mostly right now on proof of work, but transitioning to proof of stake. And I would just say up front that you shouldn't reject one side or one consensus mechanism just because it uses too much energy. If you do this, you'd be someone who rejects cars and airplanes because they use more energy than horses. And a lot of the people who really pretend to care about the environment, they fly everywhere on private jets, which are incredibly wasteful. And so we see the hypocrisy in the system. I'm very much in favor of clean water and clean air. But what I don't like is hypocrites who say, I can use a lot of fossil fuels and a lot of energy and consume a lot of things, but you cannot because you're part of the commoners. And this is unfortunately what a lot of Ethereans are like. Now, how does proof of work work? Very briefly, Bitcoin miners perform these math calculations on these specialized machines, these ASICs, and whoever solves the problem first gets to add the next block to the blockchain and collect the miner subsidy, which is currently 6.25 Bitcoin. They get the miner subsidy plus the transaction fees, and that combined together is the miner reward. So approximately 6.25 Bitcoin plus, of course, the transaction fees. So Bitcoin mining consumes electricity, it uses real energy. Proof of stake is sort of an idealized system that doesn't consume a lot of electricity. Basically, you lock up you need 32 Ether. You lock them up or you stake them at current prices at around $3,000 per ETH or $3,100 per ETH. It's about $100,000 at current prices. So again, people talk about the price of ASICs and mining equipment and how it's just for the rich to mine. There is a capital investment required, but it's under proof of stake. $100,000 is a lot of money for the average person as well. Now, if you stake your 32 ETH, you may be randomly selected to validate a block of transactions. And then if you validate it, you get rewarded with new ETH. If you try to cheat or break what the consensus rules are, you will have some of those ETH confiscated. Now, so these are two different systems, two different consensus mechanisms for adding blocks to the blockchain and securing the network. As I said, unfortunately, ETH has this dirty history. It had the huge pre-mine and pre-sale. So these original holders have a huge advantage when it comes to proof of stake. They don't have to buy mining equipment. They don't have to spend money on electricity. They just put up their ill-gotten ETH and they can earn even more ETH. By contrast, to mine Bitcoin, you need to buy these expensive ASICs. You need to spend money on electricity. It's extremely competitive. There's no guarantee that you will make money. This is what capitalism looks like. Anti-capitalism is you're rich, you just put up your money and you make more money. This is really the ETH proof of stake system. Bitcoin mining, as I said, is very competitive. You should not try it at home. This is for industrial players at this point. Bitcoin miners go out of business all the time unless they stay on top of things, constantly upgrade their equipment, etc. Whereas with ETH, you just stake it, you get paid, the rich get richer, there's no risk involved. As such, the transition to proof of stake is good news for the big wealthy incumbents. It's good for Coinbase. It's good for other big companies that hold a lot of ETH on their balance sheet, whether for their customers or for themselves. And one problem is that when you have these large stakeholders, they can collude to push through whatever protocol changes they want. Bitcoin is very different. Bitcoin is not controlled by the Bitcoin miners. It's controlled by the full nodes and that consensus. I've made other videos about this, but we've seen in the history, especially when the block size, when a lot of the big companies like Coinbase and Grayscale wanted to push through a larger block size for Bitcoin, all of the full nodes and the plebs basically rebelled against this. It's very different under a proof of stake system. Now, if you don't stake your ETH, if you're a holder of ETH and you don't stake it and earn a return on it, your percentage of the overall pie will shrink because those who do stake are paid with new ETH that dilutes your holdings. So basically the game theory of this is that everyone who owns ETH needs to stake it, otherwise you fall behind. By contrast, if you own 1 Bitcoin, you will always own the same percentage of the pie, 21 million Bitcoin, and you will never be diluted. Now, I'm sure a lot of people who are watching this will point out this new Ethereum protocol improvement, 1559, which will basically burn this gas fee, the base fee that's normally sent to the miners. This will have a deflationary effect on ETH in the sense that the supply, this will slightly shrink the supply, but unfortunately this is just an offset, and it's unclear how much it will offset the growth in the ETH money supply that is issued to pay the validators under proof of stake. So this is a currency that's going to need to continuously for the rest of time issue new ETH to pay the validators under proof of stake. What's going to happen under the game theory of this, as I said, if you don't stake your ETH, you get diluted, so almost everyone will stake their ETH, and then everyone will equally get hit by the money supply inflation. By contrast, Bitcoin, once the last Bitcoin is mined, the miners will just be paid with transaction fees. I can make a video about that. A lot of people think that Bitcoin won't be secure under just transaction fees. I don't think that is the case, and I will make a video about it at some point. So another problem with staking your ETH and the proof of stake consensus mechanism is that when you earn ETH on your staked ETH, it's a little bit like having a bank account and earning interest income. You need to pay taxes on that ETH that you earn by staking. By contrast, if you own Bitcoin, you never need to pay taxes until you sell it. And so there's a weird mechanism here where there's an automatic flow of ETH to the IRS over time. If the IRS accepted ETH, they would eventually end up with most of the supply. And this is not exactly what you want with a new quote unquote decentralized currency, where most of it over time, basically the higher the yield on the staked ETH, the more the taxes that will need to be paid and the more ETH that will get sent to the IRS. Now, obviously the IRS doesn't accept ETH at this point. You need to sell your ETH for dollars, and this creates its own problems. If you get paid 1 ETH for staking and that ETH is currently valued at $3,000 per ETH when you receive it, you're going to need to pay taxes on that $3,000. And if it quickly falls to $2,000 or $1,000, you're still going to need to pay taxes on that ETH that was received as if it was worth $3,000. So, as I mentioned, the higher the staking yield, the more ETH ends up in the hands of the IRS, whether in the form of dollars or in the form of ETH itself. If the IRS continues to demand US dollars, as we would expect it would, you will need to find new buyers of ETH just so you can pay your taxes in US dollars. By contrast, hodling Bitcoin is much more simple, and you never need to expend, you don't need to pay taxes along the way. Bitcoin hodlers never encounter a taxable event until they spend it or sell it. ETH hodlers will be taxed every single year, assuming they are staking. If they're not staking, they will be diluted over time. The problem with staking, as I said, is it leads to more and more centralization. It's hard to figure out how to stake. It's probably not something for the common man or common woman, and so you just let Coinbase stake your ETH for you, or some other big company, maybe Amazon or Apple at some point. And so then we're back to a centralized financial system controlled by big crappy companies like Coinbase, and you're basically working for your billionaire masters yet again. There's a further problem which hasn't been encountered yet. At some point it probably will be encountered given the geopolitical developments that we've been seeing over the last couple of years. What happens if the world internet is partitioned for a period of time? We already have this firewall with China, but there is still data being shared. The internet's not completely partitioned. But what happens if we get a situation? Here's just an example where we have the quote unquote free world internet, and this free world is becoming much less free over time. We have the Chinese internet and we have the Russian internet. And so these are three separate internets that don't really talk to each other because maybe the countries are at war, or either a hot war or a cold war. Now, what happens if the internet, we have ETH and we have Bitcoin, and it's being mined they're both being mined all around the world or staked all around the world. And then the internet gets partitioned, and then it comes back together. Maybe you have a world war, and then after that, the internet comes back together as one internet. Now you have a problem. Once those three partition internets are reconnected, which blockchain do you go with? Because for many months or many years, you'll have a free world blockchain for Bitcoin and for Ethereum, a Chinese blockchain for Bitcoin and Ethereum, and a Russian blockchain for Bitcoin and Ethereum. And so when you reconnect, how do you achieve a consensus, what the real blockchain is, what the history of transactions is? Now, under proof of work, it's very simple. It's just whichever chain is longest. And the way you increase the length of the chain is you have to burn electricity as a Bitcoin miner. Under proof of stake, there's no non-subjective way to determine which blockchain is the legitimate one. You'll have to get together and decide, should we go with the free world blockchain, Ethereum blockchain, the Chinese blockchain, the Russian blockchain? And basically whoever has the most power will just pick, or the most influence. Under proof of work, it's extremely objective, just whichever chain is longest, whichever one has the most blocks. Under a proof of stake system, there's no elegant, non-subjective way of determining which chain is the legitimate one, which basically means whoever has the most power, maybe China wins everything, and so they get to decide which is the correct Ethereum blockchain. And it will probably be to their advantage, whichever one they pick. And you can be sure of that. This sounds a lot like the traditional fiat system, where a few wealthy participants get to make all the rules for everyone else. And this is really how Ethereum has functioned over time. There have been these big holders, something like 100 holders got, call it 50 to 60% of the original Ethereum. And it is another system for making a group of people very wealthy and giving them control over other people. Whereas Satoshi Nakamoto disappeared many years ago and no longer has any influence on the protocol, Vitalik Buterin really calls the shots and has the bully pulpit in terms of determining things like future monetary policy for Ethereum, as well as pushing through something like a proof of stake transition. Many of the Ethereum miners are against this, and yet it's being pushed through because Vitalik wants it. So these are the problems. Proof of stake looks very similar to the current Federal Reserve System. You have the Cantillon Effect. Those closest to the money printer, like Vitalik, benefit. Those who have a lot of Ethereum to stake will just get richer. As I said, if the internet gets partitioned, there's no way to settle fork disputes or blockchain splits under proof of stake. There are two things I didn't talk about, which I talk about in another video that I'll link to, which is under proof of stake, the entire network can be taken down or manipulated if the validators decide to collude. And there may be financial or political reasons to do this that could exceed the cost of the lost coins that were staked. By contrast, proof of work is much more objective, and you actually have to burn energy. It's also, under proof of work, it's much more expensive to rewrite the blockchain. You have to rewrite all the blocks, and this can be prohibitively expensive if you want to go back more than a few blocks. Under proof of stake, it's not expensive to rewrite the blockchain, and so you could have collusion among a bunch of the large validators or large stakers and choose to rewrite things for political reasons. And under proof of work, it's much more objective, it's much more governed by the laws of physics. If you want to rewrite the blockchain, you're going to need to expend vast amounts of electricity and buy vast amounts of equipment. And as such, proof of stake is simply not as secure as proof of work. And this is really the biggest problem. This is the problem. It's the reason I don't like DeFi, because it's built on a currency, Ethereum, that's moving to proof of stake, which is much less secure. and is subject to all of these problems, including the problems of having a partitioned internet. If you found this video helpful, be sure to hit that subscribe and like button. Hit the notification bell if you want to be notified when I publish my next video. And let me know your questions and comments in the comment section below. Thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.